At my graduation, my dad said, "You're a disgrace to this family." And everyone laughed. I smiled, stayed silent, and showed them my new house keys. 10 minutes later, my father's voice boomed across the auditorium. Laughter erupted from my relatives, their voices blending into a cruel symphony of mockery. My mother, as always, sat quietly, eyes fixed on the program in her lap, refusing to meet my gaze. My older brother, Mark, nudged my sister, Beth, both grinning like they were in on some inside joke. I should have expected this. Every achievement of mine, no matter how hard-earned, had been met with ridicule. My father was never proud of me. My siblings thrived on belittling me. My mother? She just let it happen. So why did I think tonight would be different? Graduation was supposed to be my moment, something I accomplished entirely on my own. No support from them, no money for tuition, no encouragement. Just me, countless sleepless nights, and the sheer force of will to prove, to myself more than anyone, that I was worth something. But here they were, treating it like a joke. I could feel eyes on me, the whispers of nearby guests who had no idea what to make of this public humiliation. Some were confused, some uncomfortable, but none of them spoke up. I didn't react. I simply smiled, reached into my pocket, and pulled out the set of keys I had been waiting to reveal. I dangled them in the air, letting the metal catch the light. The laughter died. For the first time in my life, I watched my family go silent. And that was just the beginning. For a long, drawn-out moment, the only sound in the auditorium was the distant chatter of other graduates celebrating with their families. But at our row? Nothing. My father squinted at the keys in my hand, his expression shifting from amusement to something unreadable. My brother, Mark, leaned forward slightly, his smirk faltering. Beth's eyes darted between the keys and my face, as if she was trying to piece together a puzzle she hadn't realized existed. "What is that?" my father finally asked, his voice quieter but still laced with irritation. I twirled the keys between my fingers before answering. "Oh, these? Just the keys to my new house." Beth let out a sharp laugh, the kind she used when she was uncomfortable. "Yeah, right. You can barely afford rent." I turned to her, my smile never wavering. "Not rent. A house. Bought and paid for. No roommates, no landlords, just mine." I let the word settle. "Funny how a disgrace like me managed that, huh?" Silence. I watched the cracks form in real time. Mark's expression darkened. My father shifted in his seat, arms crossing as if he could physically shield himself from the weight of what I'd just said. My mother blinked rapidly, as if she had misheard. For the first time in my life, they didn't have a comeback. I let that moment stretch, savoring the unfamiliar taste of control. Then, as if nothing had happened, I slipped the keys back into my pocket and stood up. "Congratulations, son," my professor said as I approached, handing me my diploma. He gave me a firm handshake, a stark contrast to the cold indifference I was used to from my own father. I turned back to my family, diploma in one hand, house keys in the other. "Well," I said, tilting my head, "are we still laughing?" No one was. But they had no idea how much worse it was about to get. The weight of their silence was intoxicating. For years, my family had treated me as the punchline to an unending joke, one where I was always the failure, the disappointment, the burden. And yet, here I stood, diploma in one hand, the keys to my new house in the other, and for the first time, they had nothing to say. I wanted to savor the moment, let it settle into their bones the same way their insults had settled into mine over the years. I pocketed the keys and turned to leave. My job here was done. Or so I thought. "Wait!" My mother's voice cut through the quiet. It was soft, hesitant. "You bought a house?" I paused, raising an eyebrow. She had spent years pretending I didn't exist unless it benefited her. Now, suddenly, she had questions? I turned back, giving her my full attention. "Yes," I said, voice steady. "I bought a house." My father scoffed, but there was something forced about it. "And how exactly did you manage that? You've never had real money." Ah. There it was. He wasn't impressed. He wasn't curious. He was threatened. I almost laughed. He had spent my entire life drilling into me that I would never be anything. That I was weak. That I needed them to survive. And yet, here I was, standing taller than ever. I took a step closer, lowering my voice just enough that only they could hear. I managed it the same way I managed to graduate without your help, I said, my gaze locking onto my father's. The same way I built a life while you were too busy betting against me. I let that sink in before I added. By not being like you. His nostrils flared, and for a second, I thought he might stand up and hit me right then and there. That's how he always handled things when he didn't have the upper hand: anger, intimidation, control. But this time? He had nothing. I turned on my heel and walked toward the exit. If I left now, I would have won. But then Mark muttered something under his breath, just loud enough for me to hear. Probably some cheap dump in a bad neighborhood. He snorted. No way he could afford anything decent. I stopped. A slow smile crept across my face as an idea took root, one that would turn this victory into something even sweeter. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and scrolled for a moment before turning the screen toward them. A full-color image of my house filled the screen. Not an apartment. Not a rundown shack. A house. Modern, sleek, in a gated community. A place none of them could have imagined me owning. Beth leaned forward, her mouth slightly open. Even my mother's fingers twitched, like she wanted to grab the phone and make sure it wasn't some trick. But my father? His expression twisted into something ugly. I recognized that look. It wasn't anger, and it wasn't disbelief. It was jealousy. That's when I knew. They were in trouble. And they had no idea just how much I knew about them. My father's jealousy was like a storm cloud settling over his face, dark and suffocating. I had seen it before, whenever Mark achieved something, whenever Beth was praised, but never toward me. Because in his mind, I was never a threat. Until now. Beth's eyes flicked between the photo of my house and my face, her disbelief melting into something else: concern. Not for me, of course. For herself. You're joking, right? She scoffed, but her voice was a little too tight, her laugh a little too forced. There's no way you. Oh, but I did, I interrupted smoothly. And you know, it's funny. I wasn't going to bring this up tonight. I was just going to take my diploma and go, but Mark. I turned to my brother, whose jaw tightened. He had to make a comment. And now, well, I exhaled, shaking my head. Now I have to say something. My father's fingers curled into a fist against his knee. Enough of this cryptic nonsense, he snapped. If you have something to say, say it. Oh, how I had waited for those words. I slipped my phone back into my pocket, straightened my shoulders, and smiled. All right. Let's talk. I let my gaze linger on each of them, watching their smugness crumble piece by piece. Dad, I started. Did you think I wouldn't find out about the second mortgage? The color drained from his face. Bingo. Beth's eyes widened, and Mark sat up straighter, looking between us. What? Shut up, Mark. My father snapped, but his voice was shaky. I continued, enjoying the way his face twisted into barely contained panic. The one you took out on the house last year. The one Mom doesn't even know about. My mother's head snapped toward him so fast I thought she might get whiplash. What? And just like that, the unraveling began. I watched the realization dawn in her eyes, her lips parting in horror as she pieced it together. I kept going, pressing my advantage. You were gambling with money you didn't have, weren't you? I said casually. You got in too deep, and instead of taking responsibility, you pulled your house into it. And now? I tilted my head, feigning sympathy. You're drowning in debt. You little. He started, his face red with rage, but I held up a finger, stopping him cold. We're just getting started, I said, shifting my gaze to Beth. She paled. Don't. Oh, but I must. I tapped my chin. You know, it's interesting how people post everything on social media these days. It makes it so easy to find things. Beth swallowed hard. You didn't think anyone would notice that you've been living way above your means, did you? I mused. Fancy vacations, designer bags, all those nights out, on a teacher's salary? That's impressive. I let my smile widen. Unless, of course, it wasn't your salary. Her lips trembled. Mom! I turned to her. You might want to ask Beth where all that money really came from. Beth's breath hitched. You're lying! Oh? I pulled out my phone again, scrolling to a particular screenshot. Because according to these bank transfers, it looks like you've been draining Mom's savings account for the past 2 years. My mother's hand shot to her mouth. What? Mark muttered something under his breath, shifting in his seat as if he could physically remove himself from the mess unfolding in front of him. Beth bolted up from her chair. You went through my accounts? That's illegal. I shrugged. Not if Mom was the primary account holder. And lucky for me, she was. The room was suffocating now, tension filling every inch of space. My mother looked between Beth and my father, betrayal clear in her eyes. Is this true? She whispered. Beth didn't answer. My father didn't deny it. Mark? He just sat there, shaking his head. And then I turned to him. You look awfully quiet, I said. I guess that's because you already knew. His head snapped up. What? No, Don't bother. I cut him off. Beth covered for you once before, didn't she? That time you borrowed 10 grand from Dad's company to pay off your own mess? Mark's eyes darted to our father, panic flashing across his face. You what? My father's voice dropped to a dangerous growl. And suddenly, for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one being torn apart in the middle of a family gathering. No, this time, they were the ones unraveling. And I was just getting started. Mark's mouth opened and closed, his usual arrogance shattered in real time. Dad, listen, it wasn't. But my father was already turning on him, his anger shifting from me to his favorite son. You stole from my company? Mark stammered. It wasn't stealing. I just borrowed it. I let out a quiet chuckle. Did you ever pay it back? The silence that followed was answer enough. Beth, still reeling from being exposed, turned on me instead. Why are you doing this? She hissed. I tilted my head. Why? Because I spent my whole life being treated like the family joke. Because every time I accomplished something, you all found a way to tear me down. I exhaled slowly, savoring the moment. So I figured, why not return the favor? My mother, still in shock, looked between my father and Beth. You took my money? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Beth's lips trembled. Mom, I just needed some help. No. My mother shook her head, and for the first time, I saw something unfamiliar in her eyes. Anger. Beth shrank back. My father was still locked onto Mark, his hands clenched at his sides. I smiled to myself. For years, they had made me feel small. But now, they were the ones falling apart. And I had never felt taller. The tension in the room was suffocating. My father, once the untouchable force in our family, sat stiff with rage. My mother's face twisted with betrayal as she looked at Beth. Mark was pale, staring at the floor like a child caught red-handed. And me? I stood there, watching the chaos unfold, the chaos they had created. I could have walked away then. I had already won. But there was one last thing I needed to say. I turned to my father, making sure I had his full attention. Oh, and one more thing, I said casually. Since I know you're going to need money soon, don't bother calling me. His jaw tightened. You ungrateful little. No. I held up a hand, cutting him off. You don't get to lecture me. Not after everything. I exhaled slowly, my voice turning ice cold. I'm done with this family. Enjoy your mess. Beth let out a shaky breath. You can't just. I can. And with that I turned and walked away, leaving them behind, exactly where they deserved to be. I walked out of the auditorium into the cool night air, my pulse steady, my breathing calm. For the first time in my life, I was free. No more insults. No more guilt trips. No more being the convenient scapegoat while they hid their own failures behind laughter. I could have left it at that, but I knew my family too well. They weren't the type to sit in their own misery and self-reflect. No, they would panic. They would scramble for control. And sure enough, I didn't make it 5 steps before my phone buzzed. "Mom, come back inside. We need to talk." I smiled. I let it ring again and again before answering, keeping my voice light. "Oh, now you want to talk?" I heard rustling, and then my father's voice came through, lower, more controlled, but I could hear the strain underneath it. "You don't just walk away from your family." I let out a soft laugh. "That's funny. Because for years you all made it very clear that I was never really part of it." A long silence. Then my mother spoke, her voice softer. "Please, honey. We're still your family." I shook my head. "No. You were a weight around my neck." There was a pause. Then my father tried a different tactic. "All right, fine," he snapped. "You made your point. But don't act like you're better than us. Just because you bought some house." "Oh, it's not just a house," I interrupted, enjoying the way his words caught in his throat. "You know what else I have?" Silence. I took my time, letting the moment stretch. "Security," I finally said. "A solid job. Savings. Investments." My smile widened. "Things you don't have anymore." My father exhaled sharply. I could hear it now, the truth settling into him, suffocating him. He had lost control. My mother, still desperately clinging to whatever illusion she had left, tried one last plea. "We need you." There it was. Not "we love you." Not "we're sorry." Just "we need you." I closed my eyes, breathing in the moment. Then, in the calmest voice I had ever used with them, I said, "I know." And then I hung up. The second I hung up, the text started rolling in. "Mom, we need to talk." "Beth, you're acting crazy. Just come back inside and stop being dramatic." "Mark, you're seriously doing this? Over what? A stupid house? Dad, you don't get to just cut us off. You owe this family." I laughed. "Owe them? For what? The years of ridicule? The constant belittling? The way they used me like an ATM while pretending I was a disappointment?" They were scrambling now, panicking. Good. I ignored the messages and walked toward my car. But before I could reach it, the auditorium doors swung open behind me. "Hey!" I turned to see Beth rushing toward me, her heels clicking against the pavement. Mark followed close behind, his hands shoved into his pockets, scowling. Beth stopped a few feet away, her expression carefully composed, but I could see the tightness in her jaw, the barely concealed frustration in her eyes. "Look," she started, her voice softer than before. "I get it. You're upset. But this," she motioned between us, "this is stupid. You're just throwing everything away because of some petty grudge." I tilted my head. "A grudge?" "Yes." She folded her arms. "So what if Dad said some things? Or if we joked around? That's just how our family is. We mess with each other. It's not that deep." I let out a slow breath, shaking my head. "You don't get it, do you?" Beth opened her mouth, but I cut her off. "It wasn't just jokes, Beth. It was years. Years of being treated like I was less than you. Years of watching Dad praise Mark for every tiny thing while he tore me down. Years of giving and never once being given anything in return." I held her gaze. "And you want me to just get over it because it's inconvenient for you?" Mark scoffed. "Oh, come on, man. You've always been too sensitive. We all had to deal with Dad's crap." I turned to him. "Yeah? And yet he never called you a disgrace. Never mocked your achievements. Never made you feel like you didn't belong." I took a step closer, lowering my voice. "You had it easy. And deep down you know it." Mark didn't respond. He just looked away, jaw clenched. Beth sighed, rubbing her temples. "Fine. Let's say you're right. Let's say we were unfair to you. You proved your point tonight. You made Dad look stupid. You embarrassed us. So what happens now?" I smiled. "Now? I walk away. Beth blinked, thrown off by my bluntness. You don't mean that. Oh, I do. I turned back toward my car, opening the door. You're all on your own now. No more handouts. No more safety net. Let's see how you handle it. Beth's mask of composure finally cracked. You can't just abandon your family. I met her gaze one last time. Watch me. And then I got in the car and drove away, leaving them behind for good. I didn't check my phone as I drove. I already knew what the messages would say: begging, guilt-tripping, maybe a few insults thrown in for good measure. It didn't matter. For the first time in my life, they needed me. And I was done playing their game. When I pulled up to my new house, I just sat there for a moment, taking it in. Mine. The place was quiet, untouched by their voices, their judgment. No memories of being torn down, no lingering reminders of the past. I stepped inside, locking the door behind me. And then, as if the universe had been waiting for me to get comfortable, my phone started ringing. I sighed, pulled it out, and saw my mother's name flashing on the screen. I let it ring twice before answering. Yes? There was a pause. Then, in the softest voice she had used in years, she said, Sweetheart. I'm sorry. I almost laughed. Sorry? I repeated. For what, exactly? For everything, she whispered. For the way we treated you. For the things your father said. I should have spoken up more. I should have. Her voice broke. I just don't want to lose you. I leaned back against the kitchen counter, expression unreadable. Funny, I murmured. You didn't seem too worried about that when Dad was calling me a disgrace in front of everyone. She inhaled sharply. That was a mistake. He didn't mean it. I cut her off. No, Mom. He did mean it. He's meant every word he's ever said to me. I exhaled, letting my tone turn cold. And you let him. Silence. Then, finally, she whispered, Can we fix this? I closed my eyes. Can we? Could she undo years of silence? Could my father undo the damage? Could my siblings erase the scars they left? No. Some things weren't fixable. I exhaled slowly, then said the words I had never thought I'd be strong enough to say. No, Mom. We can't. A choked sound came from the other end of the line. Please just come home so we can talk. This is home, I said, glancing around my house. And I think it's about time you realized that. And then, before she could say another word, I hung up. I stood there for a long time, phone still in my hand, the weight of everything settling in. Then, slowly, I placed it on the counter and looked around, at my house, my space, my new life. No more waiting for their approval. No more fighting to be seen. No more bending over backward for people who never cared. For the first time ever, I was free. I walked to the front door, opened it, and stepped outside. The night air was cool, crisp, different. And as I stood there, taking it all in, a slow smile spread across my face. Because I had finally won.